Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is a week since our world changed, and for 8 nights, children have worried in their beds and their bunkers whether or not they will wake in the morning or lose their parents. Putin has placed the fate of his legacy in this invasion, and that makes him dangerous. So we must focus on limiting the bloodshed however we can. In terms of humanitarian, there is much worse to come. We must record and document war crimes, and we must ensure we finally have an atrocity prevention strategy in place across every war zone and conflict zone. We must plan for the use of chemical, incendiary and thermobaric weapons and have meaningful repercussions in place should they be used. There is lots of discussion at the moment about a humanitarian corridor, and I'm afraid I do not support these because they only work when all sides agree, and we cannot trust the Russians. Small corridors are insufficient in a nation this size to get the aid that is needed, and ultimately these corridors become political footballs with much political energy wasted on them. For example, the Aleppo enclave, where the UN Security Council... Absolutely.
The Honourable Member is somewhat of an expert on foreign affairs. Is she finding that there is an outpouring in Rutland and Melton of your residents and constituents wanting to support the humanitarian effort and lend their help to refugees trying to flee from Ukraine?
My residents are absolutely definitely determined to help people, and the way they do that best is financial donations through those given. The Ukrainians have been clear with me they fear that clothes and food and medicine could be laced with all sorts of appalling weapons. So we have to make sure that we do what they ask, which is through financial donations. Humanitarian corridors become political footballs. There are no examples where they have worked in the world, and the UN Security Council more often than not has to approve every single aid delivery. We have to make sure that aid gets there, and there is a problem, however, where our sanctions regime is stopping the effective delivery of humanitarian aid. We need a humanitarian exemption like that agreed for the UN Resolution 2615 in December, which the US has also passed domestically, because currently humanitarian aid organisations are unable to negotiate with those entities who are sanctioned. Now, we may not like it, but they have to engage with all parties to ensure that aid can reach them. So I urge the government to pass a similar motion to that which the US and the UN passed on the Afghanistan debacle to make sure that we get what we need so aid can get to everyone in Ukraine. We also need to make sure that the UK holds a donor conference like we did on Syria in 2016 to bring in the funds needed around the world. And I would also urge the government to make sure that we have ready and waiting balloons to go up to keep the internet on in Ukraine, because there is no question that the Russians will at some point decide that they have truly lost the information war and they will switch off the internet, and we have the capabilities to keep it switched on. When it comes to sanctions, I really welcome what the government has done, particularly on the central bank, which was a true economic strike. And I know that it is due to the British government that SWIFT has been banned across the world, and that it was the Prime Minister on G7 calls that made sure that happened when others were reluctant to do so. But now we need to go further. Secondary sanctions are required on those who are cynically filling the gaps made by the sanctions we've put in place. We also need to sanction Shoigu and the military generals and the Chief of Staff Gerasimov, and we need to use our family of overseas territories who can help us because they hold information on these shell companies and they are willing to play their part. We also need to impose restrictions on ruble clearing, and the number 10 business group should work to make sure that it's not just the oil companies that stop working there. We need retail and consumer companies to also pull out of Russia now. When it comes to the military effort, I welcome that we've been planning since November and arming our friends. We now need more air defence systems, but we also need to launch deniable cyber attacks against the Russian government if we do not see them pull back and we see any chemical weapons used in any form. We should also be looking at defection offers and rewards, which of course should be deniable as well. I want to touch briefly on the nuclear threat that Putin has made. That is a sign of weakness. It is a sign of the importance of Ukraine to him, the impact of the measures we put in place, and the unity of our alliances. But we unfortunately have to take those threats seriously. Now, in terms of information operations, we have done an incredible job, and the UK has led this internationally, exposing the reality of what's going on the ground and the false flags. I'd also like to pay tribute to Bellingcat and to the Centre for Information Resilience, who've done incredible work. We must deny them plausible deniability, and we must ensure that future prosecutions can take place, but also that we amplify unease and protest within Russia and amplify the costs of their actions. Finally, on diplomatic measures, yes, Putin has united us, but we must make sure this does not push Putin closer to China, and we must expel Russian spies. On the peace talks, these are a charade. There has been no ceasefire, and when I worked on Syria, we saw exactly the same sort of ridiculous measures that had no meaningful contribution. This is one man's invasion, and one man is responsible, and the bravery of the people of Ukraine is something of which there will be songs sung for many, many years to come. In the national anthem it says, "The glory and freedom of Ukraine has not yet died," and it must not. Slava Ukraini, Heroyam Slava. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr